Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Gabe Friedman. I'm Director of Editorial Experiences at 70 Faces Media, and I'm really excited to learn about all of these events, these celebrations and traditions that take place in Jewish communities around the world, normally tied to Passover. I am very ignorant of them. I'm going to learn a ton, and I'm really excited. I will just quickly introduce our three speakers today, and then I will pass it over to them. They're each going to give about a 15-minute presentation on each of the three traditions that we're going to go over today. And at the end, we'll have 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A time. So feel free to put questions in the chat as we go. As always, be courteous and nice in the chat with everyone. I'm also going to put a couple of times, I'm going to plug a new My Jewish Learning page that I've created, my team has created, that if you like this event and you want to come to more things, we have many more offerings, including a Ladino class coming up that someone in this event might be interested in. So look out for that as well. But for now, I'm excited to introduce, I'll go one by one here. Talking about Mamuna today is Hannah Eliza Goldman, who's a producer and performer based in Brooklyn, who has co-produced Mamuna events in New York for over 5 years. Her audio play In the Kitchen, a memoir narrative of Arab Jewish womanhood in collaboration with Awafi Kitchen, sold out three times over to an international audience and was subsequently featured at the Jewish Museum of Maryland. She has written about Mizrahi history and culture for Hey Alma and The Forward. I'm admitting a few more people streaming in. This is good. Okay. Talking about Resh Shata, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, is Sam Miller, who's an advocate for the preservation of linguistic and cultural diversity within Jewish communities. He's of Nash Didan heritage, which is a community from part of Iran, I believe, through his mother's side of the family, and of Ashkenazi heritage through his father's side. And he's a speaker of Lishan Didan, Jewish, which is Jewish Neo-Aramaic. Very cool. He's currently involved in using emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence to benefit Jewish language preservation. And last but not least, talking about Seharaneh, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong as well. A Kurdish Jewish tradition is Tamar Zaken, an educator, social worker, and community organizer from the East Bay. She served for over a decade on the leadership team of Memizrach Shemesh, Beit Midrash for Social Change in Jerusalem. And there she used Sephardic texts as community organizing tools and ran a Jewish service learning program for more than 300 pre-army volunteers. She currently works at Jewish Family and Children's Services as an outreach director. And in her spare time, she translates Sephardic rabbinic texts to expose English-speaking audiences to their inspiring message of inclusion and justice. So what a panel of people. So excited to get started. Sam, do you want to go first and share your screen, and I will hand it over to you.
Yes, okay. Let's see what I can do. If I share this in slideshow, can everyone see?
Yeah, looks good to me. Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Sam, and I'm talking to you guys today about Leil Shata or Shabesal, which it literally means the night of the year. Leil Shata is in Jewish Neo-Aramaic and Shabesal is in Farsi. And so what is Leil Shata? So on the evening that Pesach ends, when Moroccan Jews celebrate Mimuna, which you'll hear about later, and across the border in Iraqi Kurdistan, Sehraneh is celebrated, which you will also hear about. Neshtidan and Jews from Iranian Kurdistan celebrate Rosh Hashanah or New Year's. And then what about Shabesal? So many other Persian Jews also celebrate Shabesal, which can in many respects be considered the same holiday as Leil Shata. they mean the exact same thing. It's a literal translation, and most of the customs, there's a lot of variation, but they're almost identical. Uh, and so I wanted to give you guys a brief overview of Neshtida, and I figured most people here would have some sort of idea what a Persian Jew was, but many people might not know what a Neshtidan Jew is. So Neshtidan Jews are Aramaic-speaking Jews from northeastern Iran and southeast Turkey, and it's basically on this map over here. If you see the border from Iraq, it's basically everything east of that Iraqi border. It's like a mountain range. And Nashidan are part of this broader Aramaic-speaking Jewish community who live in of Iranian, Azerbaijan, and Kurdistan, and so that um, Jews who live a little bit further south in Iran do still speak Neo-Aramaic, but don't necessarily call themselves Nashidan. Um, and so, as for the holiday, I think I have to move this. Sorry, guys, can't read. So on Lil Rashata, on New Year's Eve, we celebrate the New Year for the grain and for the Jewish people. It is one of the many New Years celebrated by Jews, including Rosh Hashanah and Simchilane, or Tu B'Shvat, that's how we would call it. And many of the customs for this holiday show influence from Nowruz, a Persian New Year, Sizdah Badar, which is another holiday related to Nowruz, Cheb Nisan, which is a Syrian New Year, but there are also distinctly Jewish practices that mark this holiday, and there are striking parallels to both Mimuna and Sehrane, which you guys can figure out later. Um, the preparation for the holiday typically begins after Mincha on the last day of Pesach. Most Jews would go out to the market to buy chametz and dairy, buy bread products, and this is on the eighth day of Pesach, before the holiday has technically ended. And while some do indeed wait until after the holiday is over to make preparations, and some completely don't even celebrate in the night and celebrate it the next day, there are many reasons why people may partially end the holiday early, in a sense, and the holiday here being Pesach. And a common reason that people will give is that the shops would simply close before Pesach ends, and so in order to purchase things, you need to do it. Like you need to do it before the eighth day ends. But there is another reason, and there are some that maintain that this stems from the Omer. So in Menachot 10, the Mishnah teaches that some families prepare. Uh, sorry. The Mishnah teaches a lot in this tractate, in this chapter of Menachot, about the waving of the Omer and what's done. And some families on this holiday actually prepare roasted grain called qali for a mitzvah qali, like the mitzvah of roasted grain. And specifically, there's this section here which says once the Omer was sacrificed, from the moment it was sacrificed, the produce of the crop was permitted immediately. But for those distant from Jerusalem, and this goes back to this community. We have a tradition of these Jewish communities that we did not return to this Israel for the Second Temple. We stayed in Babylonia, and so these are the communities that they're talking about, is that the new crop is permitted from midday and beyond. And the reason being is that by the time midday has happened, we know the people in Yerushalayim are not they're not stupid. They know what they're doing, and by then it's been sacrificed. And so what's this whole idea with midday? This is because we celebrate an extra day of the holiday because they didn't know the timing correctly. But in this case, you see that people actually say that, well, we only need to celebrate three-quarters of the day, not the full one day. And this is specifically referring to the waving of the Omer, which would have been on the second day of Pesach, after, not necessarily after the whole thing, but there is this concept in general that preparing for, in memory of the Omer, we can start preparation for that before after three-quarters of the day has passed. And so putting that aside, we can talk about what actually happens. So when the night begins, in every house, colorful tables are filled with sweets, chametz, and dairy. And some people must have beer. It's a wheat grain. It's chametz. Nearly all Jews would abstain from dairy on Pesach because they would hold by Chalav Yisrael. Basically, they wouldn't consume dairy or milk that was not did not come from a cow that was owned by a Jewish person, specifically on Pesach. And so that was impossible to get for various reasons. Their Jews didn't really own cows, And so for that reason, people didn't really eat dairy for the whole of Pesach. And so, in addition to this big celebration with chametz, you also have a big celebration for dairy. So some foods that you might see are zalubia, if you've ever had them. They're these saffron syrup funnel cakes, mastochiar, which is cucumber yogurt soup, duchva, which is a rice and yogurt pudding, pishpra, which are vegetable omelets, gulabieh are these rosewater cookies, which are very similar to Iraqi haji badam, which they even have, I think there's a version of that that's specifically for Pesach, that's kosher le Pesach, if I'm not mistaken. And you guys should look into the recipe for that. Um, there's also this idea of making visits to each other's houses. And so this is, I want to talk more about my community, about Nashiden Jews. And so people go to from each other's houses to house. They bless each other. Some things you might hear are Lil Shata Bricha Basem Tahave, like may the New Year's Eve be blessed and comfortable. If you're visiting someone's house and you're leaving and you want to bless them, you could say El Habehra Mendai Bela Basor Ludle. So God shouldn't lessen the light from this house. And then a common blessing, which is given for many New Years, not just this one. It's actually even might even be given on a similar thing is also given on Yom Kippur. And so you would say Rabba Shinne Shate Matetu, which may you arrive at many years and years. And specifically, as part of this, children were often sent by adults to give gifts. So, for example, let's say there's someone and they're like, okay, I want to send these clothes to my sister, and so they would go to their children and they'd say, hey, take this box and go to your aunt's house and give the gifts. And in this way, people would go back and forth. They would bless each other, and there was this holiday. Uh, and so, what about some parallels that I was talking about? So, a Jewish Haftzin is the question. So, for those of you who are familiar with it, on Nowruz, a Haftzin, or literally a 7S, is set up by many Iranians and other Persians. It's also celebrated. The holiday is celebrated by many non-Iranians as well. But the Haftzin is this very Persian custom of setting up a table with seven things which start with the letter S to have symbolism for the coming year. And so there's a lot of parallels to this that are also maybe set up in on Lil Shatar or Shabasal. So one thing you might find is a bowl of water with silver or gold coins and jewelry inside. And this is something you will find on a half scene. It's called sekke, or coins in Farsi, and they put coins in a bowl of water. But for us, this represents the drowning of the army of Pharaoh during the splitting of the sea, and the jewelry and loot that the children of Israel took with them. And you might find a chumash, or like a book of the Torah, opened on the table for everyone to read. Then people read about this kind of about like the Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea. There is a bracha that may be recited in some families. I can't find the full text anywhere, but it does draw heavily from the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, and this whole process of like the splitting of the sea and even into the Ten Commandments and this time period. Um, so another other things that have similarities is that a mirror is set up to reflect happiness into the coming year. Mint or other greens, vegetables may be placed on the table, and all of these customs vary in practice, and adherence to them varies from community to community. It's not that one community necessarily does all of these things, but most communities do most, or some families do a lot. And in my research, one thing that I found that was really, really interesting was that I thought that there's this custom which is just Nashtidan, let's say, and most non-Aramaic speaking Jews haven't heard of it, but then one family does do it. Like for example, like the putting the coins in the water, and so um, there is this variation. In the pictures here, you can see as well. You can see that there is some grain, some wheat, and in the bottom right, that's actually mastochiar, I'm pretty sure. And so then the next day, on Yom Shata or Ruzasal, we can find more similarities to Sehrane or Sizdabadar. And so many people go out to the park, which is Bagh in Farsi. Another name for Sizdah Bedar is Ruz Bagh. It's typically celebrated, I forget, I think 14 days after Nowruz, some number. Someone fact check me on that. But the people go out to the park, or they would go to the field, as called dashta in Aramaic. In Iranian Kurdistan, many Jews have a very strong um, tradition to go out to the field. And they have a picnic. It's very similar to Sehraneh that you will hear about later. And then this brings us to today, where unfortunately it's almost forgotten. Although Mimuna and even Sehrana have enjoyed some popularity, Lil Shata or Shabasal is really hardly practiced. And yet everyone I spoke to prepare information for this presentation agrees that it used to be the happiest night of the whole year for Iranian Jewish communities. And so perhaps in the future we'll see a resurgence of celebration of this holiday. And yeah, and for anyone here, if you guys grew up celebrating this, if you grew up hearing about this holiday, if there are any things that I left out, anything that you remember, please like let us know in the comments. And I think overall, maybe we can get some good documentation for this holiday because it really doesn't exist on the internet much at all. Uh, that brings me to questions. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was really fascinating. We'll just lump all questions together at the end, if that's all right. Um,
Okay.
um, Tamar, would you like
Yeah,
to go next?
yeah, I'm ready to go. I actually will share my screen in the middle when I have a text I want to share with everyone, but
Okay.
really great to see everyone here. And I'll share a bit about myself and my connection. I saw on the map that Sam shared that Zacho was up there in the left-hand corner. And my dad was born in Zacho, Kurdistan, which is in northern Iraq. But he came to Israel when he was about 4 years old. And kind of growing up, I grew up in the Bay Area. He married an American woman. We moved back to California, and I lived here till I was 13 and really didn't celebrate Seherane when we were living in America. But when we moved back to Israel when I was 13, um, in the during Sukkot, we would go to Seherane. And so it's kind of confusing. Why was it during Sukkot? Because this is our event today is about holidays in the spring. And it's really interesting the dynamic between the different immigrant groups in Israel. But because Mimuna, there was a lot of Moroccan Jews that came in large numbers, and they kind of set down the space of Passover. At the end of Passover, Mimuna happens. And so the Kurdish Jews moved the celebration of Seherane to Sukkot. And I, about for 10 years, worked at this organization that is called Mimizrach Shemesh. And the aim of that organization was to kind of raise awareness about Sephardic and Mizrahi identity and to teach about, what Jews from Arab and Muslim lands bring to the Jewish community, bring to Israel. And one of the things that has happened because of that organization is there's like a resurgence of Mizrahi identity in Israel. People are kind of more aware of their roots. And so a lot of Kurdish Jews have organized to bring back Seherane to happen during Pesach. So that is to say that it's interesting when we celebrated it, but when I first celebrated Seherane growing up, it was usually near a body of water. It was a very big event where many people, many Kurdish families from Jerusalem and other places where there were a lot of Kurdish Jews who settled, we would go to like Khor Shatan in the north or different places with water, and we would set up tents. And there would be just like dancing, eating, and swimming. That's kind of what we did. what I know about the holiday in Kurdistan is Sahar. The word Sahar means moon. And so kind of the connection to the moon, or the connection to nature, is a major part of it. And another part of the holiday is storytelling. And it's funny because I don't have, I have slideshows about Seherane, but I didn't prepare, I specifically didn't prepare one for today, because one of the things that is true about Kurdish Jews and the way that they taught and passed on the Torah was verbal. It wasn't written down. And one of the other aspects of Seherane was storytelling, that, you know, people would sit around, they would eat, they would be together with family, and they would tell stories. And my dad passed away last June, and it's almost his 11 months coming up in May. And I wanted to tell you a story that he told me growing up. And I'm sure that it was told also during Seherane or in other circles, times where women, you know, I'm sure his mother told him this story and he told it to me. And so the story it takes place in the mountains, and there's a midwife, and it's raining outside, and the midwife is getting into bed. She's all kind of warm in her bed, and then she hears a loud knock on her door. And she gets up. She's used to this because she's a midwife. She knows people are about to give birth in the middle of the night, so she goes to the door, and she opens the door, and there's a man with a cloak, and she can't see his face. And he says, "Come with me, my wife is about to give birth." And so she's a bit scared because she can't see this man's face, but she gets her bag and she goes with the man, and she follows him up this mountain, and it's kind of a windy road up this mountain as they walk. And as they walk, the man says to her, "If it's a boy, I'll bless you. And if it's a girl, I'll curse you." And he keeps saying this over and over again. So that's how my dad told it to me. I have two daughters, so I usually switch it around and change the story. If it's a girl, I'll bless you. And if it's a boy, I'll curse you. But so she follows this man. She follows the man up into this cave. And in the cave, she sees this man's wife, and she's about to give birth, and she helps the woman give birth, and thank God it's a boy. And so she's blessed. And then the man thanks her and says, "Go into that room over there in the cave, go into that room, and you can take whatever you want." And so she goes into the room, and the room is filled with piles of jewels and gold and any kind of amazing thing that you would imagine, any jewelry. But there's also a pile of garlic in the corner. And this is how I imagine it, just because I think of my grandma Zilpa, my dad's mom. She had like a smock dress with like a little apron. So the midwife took her apron and filled it with, not with any of the jewels, but with the garlic. And she ran because she was afraid of this man. And she ran back to her home through the windy road. And as she ran, the garlic fell from her dress until she arrived home, and it was still dark. And so she dropped her apron and she went to bed. And in the morning she woke up, and there was like this bright light from her house. And she was like looking, and she didn't understand, where is that from? And she found that it was the garlic, but it actually wasn't garlic, it was gold. And that is like a story that my dad used to tell me. Now we can talk about the different themes here and what is the message. I think some of the kind of the takeaways from the story that I think about are, you know, modesty is really important, like not taking the ornate jewels, but taking the garlic. And I think there's something about both the way that Jews celebrated during Seherane, kind of in a communal way, with being together, being connected to nature, but also kind of seeing everyone as equal. And with that, I wanted to kind of share this text. One of the things that we at Mimizrach Shemesh, where I worked, one of the things we wanted to do is to share not only the traditions of these communities, but to also share texts and stories, and to realize that just like any other people, the Kurdish Jews, the Moroccan Jews, the Nashtidan Jews, all of us are different and have different cultures and stories. And we are good at food and music, but we're also good at all these other things. So I wanted to share this text. Let me just make sure this is open correctly. By this Kurdish rabbi. One second. And can you see it in the right way? Can you all see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So oops, where did it go? Okay. So he says, in our community in Zacho, there were 2 synagogues. One was bigger than the other, but both of them did not have any plaques that indicated when they were built or who built them or who the donors were. Once I asked about this, and an elder from the community shared that first the synagogue was very small and the entire community worked together voluntarily to expand it. I bring this up because no one was the owner of the synagogue, and in this way, the entire community felt ownership, like during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. This is how it was in our community. And I just think it's interesting to think about all of these different holidays that we're talking about today, because a lot of them are about breaking down boundaries, boundaries between the home and outside. If you set up a tent outside, you're kind of, nature becomes your home for a day or two, or for the time that you celebrate Seherane. Usually it was during Chol Moed Pesach. This is when we would celebrate it. And it's the same with Mimuna, which we'll hear about in a second, where our doors are open and people are visiting. And maybe the boundary between our home and outside is changed in some way. So that is my short presentation about Seherane. And I hope that we can continue to celebrate it and all these holidays. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Very interesting stuff. Hannah, we'll switch it to you.
Hi, everyone. Am I spotlighted?
No, let me fix that.
Okay. Hello. So I'm going to share my screen and share my sound. And yeah. Okay. So here we go. No, wrong one. There we go. All right, so I'm here to talk a little bit about Mimuna, and it was so amazing to hear about these other springtime Passover celebrations, because like my fellow panelists said, there are a lot of similarities, and I'm sure you'll recognize them soon. So this is Mimuna, and let's get into it. I wanted to start with a quote from the Moroccan Israeli singer Netta El Kayam. She said, "They asked me, what does Eid Mimuna mean to me? I said, the freedom to be as Moroccan as much as I want." So what is Mimuna? Mimuna is a Maghrebi aka North African Jewish holiday that takes place as night falls on the last day of Passover. Its roots are in North Africa, especially Morocco. And during Passover, as I'm sure many of you know, Jews are forbidden from eating leavened bread. And as the tradition goes, they would sell their flour to their Muslim neighbors before Passover and then buy it back the night that Passover ended. And then the Jewish women would make mufleta with the flour, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute, and invite everyone to partake in the celebration. And like Tamar said, the doors would be open, people would be flowing in and out. It was basically this giant block party that could last all night. And there's actually a very sweet children's book called A Sweet Meeting on Mimuna Night. And in this little illustration, you can see that this Muslim girl is handing the sack of flour to her Jewish neighbor. And in this scene, it's kind of cute. She trips and almost drops the sack of flour, but the Jewish girl catches it just in time. So it's a very sweet representation of that. So the most essential element of mimuna is mufleta, and it is a thin crepe. It's made very quickly, and you cook it in a pan and cook it in a stack, and you flip it, add a stack, flip it, add, flip it, add. And it can be topped with butter, honey, cinnamon, lemon juice, rosewater syrup, orange blossom syrup, even Nutella. The list goes on. Whatever you want can go on your mufleta. And just want to share a personal story here. So these are some mufleta that I cooked a few years ago. And in the picture right above it is me and my Safta Isha. And my Safta Isha is my grandmother on my father's side. She's from Morocco. And, my father was Moroccan, and he and the whole family lived in Israel, but I was raised by my Ashkenazi mother in the States, and I would spend every Passover with that side of the family. And so I never really got to experience Mimuna with my Moroccan family, but many years ago when I was beginning the journey of reclaiming my Moroccan identity and history and heritage, Mimuna was a big part of that, like doing Mimuna with my Mizrahi friends. And so I called my dad and asked him about what our family did for Mimuna. And it was really just the mufleta. Safta Isha would make the mufleta. And so to me, that's the core of it. And whenever I make mufleta or eat mufleta, I feel like with my hands, I'm connecting with my grandmother. So yeah, that's my bit about my personal connection. Besides mufleta, there are lots of different elements of mimuna, including wearing traditional clothing like kaftans, marzipan confections, because during Passover, obviously you couldn't cook with flour. So women would spend the whole of Passover using marzipan to make all these confections and then bring them out during Mimuna. Lots of cookies and pastries, dates, mint tea, nana. I think Sam said in the beginning that mint was also part of the Nashtidan celebration. Fresh flowers to signify spring, coins in flour to signify wealth. Lots of dairy. It's a halavi meal, which I, in my research, thought it was about fertility and very symbolic. But after hearing the first presentation, I'm like, maybe there's something else about the cows that I didn't know before. Also, it was an auspicious time for matchmaking. And something interesting that I found in my research is that there would sometimes be an element of drag, that in this giant block party, some men would dress in women's clothing and go throughout the village and entertain. There would often be tales of Jews dressing as Muslims, Muslims dressing as Jews. So like Tamar mentioned, there's a lot of playing with boundaries, and that includes gender roles. And it's definitely a dream of mine to do a Mimuna drag show one day. I haven't done it yet. And then last but not least, there's North African music, including the song Halala Mimuna. And I'm just going to play a little bit for you, and you can read the chorus. Hope we can all hear.
Yes, we can. It's great.
So yeah, that is the Halala Mimuna song. And Halala Mimuna translates to Madam Mimuna. No one really knows where the name Mimuna came from, but one theory is that it is named after the Amazigh goddess of luck, Amazigh being the indigenous population of North Africa. And I also want to draw your attention to the phrase on the third line, Terpo Utsadu, which roughly translates to thrive and be happy. And this is a greeting that you say at Mimuna, Terpo Utsadu, or just for short, Terpo, Terpo. It's just a greeting that we use on Mimuna. So in Morocco, Mimuna was really this ultimate symbol of coexistence between Muslim and Jewish communities. From the capital of Rabat to the smallest villages in the Atlas Mountains, Muslim and Jewish neighbors would celebrate Mimuna together. And again, I used an illustration from this adorable children's book. You can see the Muslim neighbors are coming into the home to all celebrate Mimuna together. But for a bit of history, there was a mass migration of North African Jews to the state of Israel, primarily in the 50s and 60s. And many were placed in Ma'abarot transit camps on the geographic periphery of Israel. They were encouraged, and I say that in quotes because it was often done through, very forceful and painful means to shed their diasporic culture and assimilate into more of the mainstream Ashkenazi culture to become more Israeli. So their accents, their clothing, and their ways of observing holidays were not really acceptable to Israeli society. And so this isn't a general rule, but I would say like Mimuna was more of a private holiday observed by families indoors. Depending on the community, it wasn't necessarily like this big block party. But in the decades following, that changed. There was a resurgence of Mizrahi pride and Mizrahi culture, which ended up being co-opted by the Israeli state. So in this picture, you can see Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and his wife Sarah. They're in a Moroccan development town and they're eating mufleta, posing for the cameras, right? So there was this trend, and there still is to this day, of Israeli politicians using this as like an excuse for a photo op without acknowledging or doing anything about the state's oppression of North African Jews. But recently, outside of the state of Israel, North African Jews have begun to reclaim Mimuna as a holiday of radical coexistence and collaboration between Jews and Muslims of the Swana region, Swana meaning Southwest Asia and North Africa. So, of course, there's been Mimuna in every diasporic community in France and Canada, etc. But I'm going to talk a little bit about my work as an organizer in New York. This picture was taken at a Mimuna in 2019. As you can see, I'm wearing my kaftan, and I'm presenting with Reem Ramadan from the Arab American Association of New York. And so this event was the 2019 Mimuna, put on by Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, JFREJ for short. And this is the lovely group of Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews who are all a part of it. And there was a ton of food, mufleta cooked by my cousin Enat. There were baked goods from Nablus Bakery, which was a local Palestinian bakery in Bay Ridge. We also had the event in Bay Ridge, which is an Arab neighborhood of Brooklyn. We had storytellers who made props to help convey their story. We had a 5-piece band playing Mizrahi music, and it was just a huge celebration, as you can see. And the following year was 2020, which was not a great year for gathering with anyone. And so some of my friends and I put on a Zoom Mimuna. And so my cousin Enat did a cooking demonstration of mufleta over Zoom. So we all made mufleta in our own homes. Sumaya Moroz did a presentation of dance, and we all learned like some North African dance together. And as you can see, I had my own special Mimuna table, which it feels very similar to the Nashtidan or like Hafsin table that Sam was talking about, with all the symbols. And the following year, we did Mimuna in the park. So it was outside, all COVID safe. We had fruit and mufleta and a DJ, and it was small, but still a nice celebration. The following year, we had Mimuna at a local Brooklyn music venue called Wild Birds. It was co-sponsored by JFREJ and Jewish Voice for Peace. We had mufleta, more cookies from Nablus Bakery, and Laura El Kislasi, who's an incredible Moroccan singer, came with her band, and as you can see, just like really brought the house down. And we also did some political education about Mimuna and this way that it is a radical holiday of coexistence between Jews and Muslims, with Jewish Voice for Peace. And there was some art by Ariel Tonkin that accompanied it, really beautiful. And then last year we did Mimuna at 9 Bob Note in Bushwick. This was co-sponsored by JVP, JFREJ, and If Not Now. Laura El Kislasi brought her band back. We had mufleta, dancing outside. It was a great vibe. And this is a picture of some, but not all of my co-organizers. We call ourselves the Egalitarian Sephardi Mizrahi Kehila. And we have committed to doing some form of Mimuna every year and some form of egalitarian Sephardi high holiday services. And we're based in New York. If you're interested in attending our services or just hearing more about what we do, please drop your email in the chat and I'll add you to our listserv. So that's just a little plug and a little bit of a brag at all the amazing Mimuna community work that I've done with this really wonderful Kehila. So lastly, Mira kind of posed this question of how can folks incorporate these traditions into their own lives? And I would say, you know, Mimuna has an interesting and complex political history. And like I shared, there is a bit of like ugly appropriation and co-optation that has taken place, especially in the state of Israel. So if you are at Maghrebi and this isn't in your tradition, I wouldn't say just like throw your own Mimuna, but there are lots of things you can do to incorporate the spirit of the holiday, which is abundance, inviting people into your home and inviting not just Jewish people, inviting Muslim people, Christian people, atheist people, you know, really making it an open celebration of carbs and whatever kind of carbs you want to make, whether it's muflets or otherwise, I think is a great way to bring the spirit of Mimuna into your practice. And also I would say, get involved in your local community and see what Muslim organizations are around. In New York, we have the Arab American Association of New York. You know, check in with your local mosques, see if there's any way that you can partner. Especially I find in New York, like when mosques are the target of hate crimes, it's really powerful when we as Jews show up to show our solidarity and vice versa. So those are a couple things that I think anyone could do to involve Mimuna into their life and practice. And I guess since I have 1 more minute left, I'm just going to play a little video of Laura El Kislasi and her band singing for just a minute. And it'll give you really a spirit of what Mimuna has been like.
شحال
yeah, that's just a little taste of Mimuna. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and I guess we can move into questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'll note that I I'm almost positive we've done past My Jewish Learning events with Laura. Maybe not with her group, but they're very popular. So hopefully we work more with her as well. And Hannah, you should note down these people in the chat giving you their email addresses. They want to be on your list. So copy them down before the end of this event. I didn't see a ton of questions in the chat. Let's see. Judith asks, is there a parallel Arab holiday to Pesach? Maybe one of you know the answer to that as experts in these various regions that you've
I mean,
talked about.
I think like the Kurdish Jews celebrated Seherane too. Like I don't think it was only Jewish when they were living there. Maybe that's what I understand. But I mean, I think also Sam, you talked
You
about
mean Arabs? Or
oh,
you
if you don't consider, yeah, I mean non-Jews. I mean, I guess Arab,
non-Jews?
but yeah,
No, sorry.
I mean, I guess
Um,
I don't know if you would consider
you had
Kurds
just said I
Arab.
thought
You're
you said
right.
Kurdish Jews, so I was
Oh, right. I think that that the non-Jews that were Kurds also were celebrating Seherane in some form when the Jews were. And then when they, but yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I have a little bit more info of that. So two things just to make things clear. Yeah, so non-Jewish Kurdish people would not be Arab. They would be Kurdish. And second, that it was very explicitly a Jewish holiday. That doesn't mean that people did not come and celebrate with them. It's a big celebration. People go to these parks and they celebrate, and so it's definitely not necessarily exclusive.
I would add that it falls at a different point every year, but a couple years ago, Ramadan was also at the same time as Mimuna. And it was really cool because we had like the Muslim people at our party breaking their fast. And then a few moments later, the Jewish people were breaking not necessarily our fast, but like we were starting to eat bread again. So that was a really cool moment. Obviously, it doesn't happen every year, but that was a fun parallel.
Hannah, I'm curious also, you mentioned, like some of the co-opting by Israeli politicians, but Mamoon is still so, compared to the Nash one that Sam was talking about, a lot more people are celebrating it still. Are a lot of Jews? A lot of Ashkenazi Jews in Israel is doing Mamuna stuff. Is it like that level of popularity, or
I don't
is
know
it
for
less
sure.
co-opted? And yeah.
I don't know for sure. I'm not an expert, but I will say that like there is a lot of language around it being an Israeli holiday.
Mm,
And so it's often framed that way, and it kind of erases the North African roots of the holiday. And um, so I can't speak to like how many individual Ashkenazi people celebrate it, but I will say that it has become kind of co-opted and like, oh, it's an Israeli holiday, and um, in that way.
right.
But
Um,
I think like Ashkenazi people go to Mimuna. Are you asking if they
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
own Mimunas? Probably not. But I think like I have friends in Israel who are Moroccan and they invite all of their friends, or they don't even invite them. They're just like, Mimuna is happening in this day and
Mhm,
everyone comes. So it's, yeah, I think
got it.
Ashkenazi people attend.
Mhm. What does moufletta taste like? Is it how different from like a French crepe?
I don't eat enough crepes to be honest. I mean, it's a pretty simple, uh, I don't know, maybe crepes are slightly oilier. I'm not sure. It's very similar to a crepe and it's very delicious. It's very simple. And really the flavoring comes from like all the toppings that you put on it. I mean, it's less formal than a crepe. Like it's always made by hand and it's never like a uniform shape. There's all these like it's more textured.
Got it. I want to try it. Sam, maybe not everyone saw the food question that you answered in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, I did want to bring that up. So someone did ask if since in Iran, Persian Jews and Neschiden Jews and Kurdish Jews didn't eat dairy, what did they typically eat? And so a lot of so it really depends on the community. So for the Neschiden community that I'm from, it is really tough because we don't eat kitniot either. I think there's this misconception that only Ashkenazi Jews don't eat kitniot. No, there are Mizrahi Jews who don't eat kitniot. And some people might be aware that of a Yemenite custom to abstain from legumes. So meaning they don't have kitniot, but they define it differently than Ashkenazim. So rice is not considered a legume, so rice is eaten. And have a similar we have a similar custom. And we in for Neschiden communities, we don't have kitniot, so we don't have legumes. We do have rice, but we don't have dairy. And so what do we eat? It's really just a lot of meat and matzah and vegetables. There's actually a stew that people make called kengere, which in Farsi is khosh de kenger. It's in English they call kenger acanthus. It's a very local vegetable. It's kind of similar to celery, very roughly. And they make a stew out of it specifically for Pesach because that's the harvest time for the vegetable. And so you put meat and kenger. It's called kengere, and you eat that. Something you might also find is badamjun, which is eggplant in Farsi. In my family, we mix them, and I mean, you can't get kangaroo in the United States, but we use celery and we use eggplant and we use meat and we make a stew out of that, and that's what we eat. The Seder, that's what we eat. Like for the meal, it's a lot of what we eat on Pesach, and then the rest is just a lot of matzah. Though in the United States, we do have access to kosher for Passover dairy, so most do not continue the practice of not eating dairy in the United States, at least. I imagine it's a similar situation in Israel.
Got it. How many are there Nashchidan Jews in that area of Iran today? What's the community like? I know you said the holidays hard to document, but
Like how many are left? It's about
yeah.
0. So
Okay.
the people had been leaving since even World War I. It was bad. It was a very war-torn region between the Ottoman Empire. The Russians came and occupied part of it. The Persians, the Kurds. There were a lot of Assyrian Christians back then. That was before Armenia Assyrian genocide. Things were better. Um, and it was a very diverse region. And there was a lot of conflict, and people had been leaving right after Israel was established. A lot of people left. Um, and then people stayed through, at least in Iran, a lot of Persian Jews stayed until the revolution. And then after the revolution, people kind of just said, that's it, we're gone. There wasn't really a community left. There is, as far as I'm aware, in the city my mother's from, which is Urmi, there is one Jew left. And it's because he married someone who isn't Jewish and they have a family there and they're living their best lives. Um, but really, it's just there's no community left to stay behind for.
Yeah. Are you in touch with you seem to be in touch with some people in different places around the globe who celebrate the holiday or stay in touch with these unique traditions?
Yeah,
Where
well,
are
so
some of
I
them?
for Neshti Dan we have a Facebook group. It's which a lot of people are in. And I would say I think we reached 6,000, which you would think is not a lot, but there aren't really even 6,000 Neshti Dan Jews in the world, period. Even before people left Iran, there really weren't very many in Iran. And people post about it, people post their stuff. But there isn't really a centralized community so much anymore. Maybe in Israel a little bit, but even that is kind of dissolved.
Yeah, that's wild. Tomorrow, how many people, I might have missed in your presentation, um, how many people actually do Saharana today in Israel
Um,
outside?
I mean, recently they've been, there's this website called Haluach Haivri. And it's actually one of my colleagues. I used to work at Hillel at Tel Aviv University, and a lot of the Hillels were doing programming to bring piyut, the Jewish liturgical music, to Israeli society, specifically Sephardic and Mizrahi Paitanim. And so the woman who kind of initiated that, Cheli Tabibi Bareket, started this website called Aloha Ivri that kind of it's like pretty much a calendar of all of these holidays. Like all the holidays that we all celebrate in our communities, but the greater Jewish world doesn't really know about. And so they also have been putting on events. And so I think last year or the year before, they had events in public spaces, kind of like what Hannah kind of initiated and beautifully in New York, to celebrate Seherane. So, and I know that they're now celebrating it during Pesach. And I'm actually in a WhatsApp group of Kurdish. I mean, they actually don't like to use the term Kurdish. They like to call themselves Assyrian Jews, but they're in an effort to reinvigorate the language, the Judeo-Aramaic language. They're trying to kind of partner with non-Jews who are Assyrian because their language is most similar to Kurdish Jews. And so they've been, sometimes I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so I haven't been attending, but I get like announcements about Seherane events. But the ones I went to were in the 90s, and there were probably like 500, 600 people at each of these events. And yeah.
I know you have to run tomorrow a couple minutes early. Do you want to, someone asked about the organization you worked for. Do you want to
Oh
quickly plug
yeah,
them
I'll
again?
just, before I leave, I'll just say, so the organization is called Mizrach Shemesh. And actually the name of the organization comes from two things. First, it comes from Shachari, like we say, Mizrach Shemesh Ad Mevo'o, the sun, from the rising of the sun to the setting of the sun. And the idea for giving our organization that name is that like the sun shines on all of us equally, and we taught about justice, and it also had the Mizrach part in it, the Mizrahi part. And also there was a book by her name is eluding me, but an amazing Egyptian, maybe someone will, so I'm sorry, I'll if someone wants to know more about this, I'll let you know. But so Mimizrach Shemesh is the name, and the organization started in the year 2000 from a group of students at Hebrew University who were Mizrahi, and they were taking classes. They saw that their heritage wasn't represented in the curriculum in the Jewish Studies department, and they started just meeting to study texts of Sephardic and Mizrahi rabbis. And then they got funding, and now they're part of Allianz. So they're part of this very big organization in Israel. They do leadership training. They work with teachers. They work with activists and communities to bring the heritage of Sephardic and Mizrahi Israelis to the forefront of Israeli society. So their website is now kiach.org.il. And I'll put it in the chat, but I have to go. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
bye.
I think it's a good time for us to wrap up as well. Thank you, Sam, as well. Thank you, Hannah, so much. Thanks everyone for coming. You asked for recipes. I found a 70 Pieces Media recipe for mufleta I put in the chat. Tomorrow I put her organization's URL in the chat, and I put my Jewish Learnings online courses page in the chat. I hope you use some of these resources and follow along with us for more things. And happy early Passover. And to those of you celebrating these events as well, enjoy them all. And we'll hope to see you soon.